Okay, now, all right, let's begin. We're now on part two of our examination of the siege of uh, Yorktown and the siege of Toulon. And now we're going to look at one of the most fascinating stories of this entire saga, and that is the story of logistics. And it's really quite extraordinary in what we see here. First of all, we have de Barras, another French fleet, is now at um, Newport, has sailed in from uh, France. And look at what it has brought with it. So we have 12 24-pounder cannons. These are siege weaponry. This is siege weaponry. This is a true siege train. 8 16-pounders long-range counter-fire, 8 mortars, 12-inch mortars, 8 high-arching mortars, and then hybrid shot and shell howitzers, and then 600 ground troops that are fundamentally siege experts. So they've come in, and so this is now absolutely essential. So now Louis XVI is sending men that are specialized in the siege warfare that is so important, and realize that Washington has no experience in siege weaponry, and Knox has done an extraordinary job for him as his artillery officer, and we'll talk more about him today. But he has field artillery. There's no way his field artillery, the light field artillery he has, could ever work in the situation of a siege against a dug-in British force. So this fleet leaves the 25th of August and arrives in September down. And so this is extraordinary in what is happening here. Now, that is what's coming from the north to Yorktown. Now, what is coming from the south is even more extraordinary in any number of ways. De Grasse, the admiral of the French fleet in the Caribbean, in this case in Cuba, at Havana, is there, and he realizes that Washington desperately needs money. He needs specie. He needs hard currency, because the Continental just is worthless. It's not worth a Continental, as the saying says. And so now de Grasse has a handful of hours, 48 hours, to raise hard capital in Havana, and it's absolutely extraordinary that he's able to do it. Now again, these are Gemini generated images, so always understand that. But what you have here are the wealthy women of Havana coming forward and donating. The better term is loaning, not donating. Loaning their jewelry to de Grasse, the French forces, and they are getting um, from them hard currency, silver, coins, that now are going to come forward. Now, Havana is the money heart of the Spanish Caribbean. Um, as some of you know, um, uh, Spain is taking an enormous amount of gold ore, silver ore, out of Mexico, out of Latin America. So it's a cornucopia for them of the gold and silver ore that they're taking out of these two countries, Mexico. Also, Havana is the center of where customs duties are collected for all the Caribbean trade, and the military payroll funds for Spain's Atlantic defenses are there. As a result, Havana is the place you want to be if you want to be going after hard currency. You want to be going after specie. And this is where de Grasse is, and he's about raising funds. And he raised an incredible amount in a very poor period of time. So he now sails from Havana to Yorktown, and he comes in the Chesapeake, and he comes into Yorktown, Um, always excuse these silly mistakes of spelling errors with the Gemini, where they generate these stuffs. It gets better every day, but it's still annoying, and it's not easy to fix. So I'm just letting it slide, and just don't pay attention to it. But de Grasse lands in Yorktown, and not only is he bringing a substantial number of men, but he's also bringing the species, and of course he's bringing arms and ammunition as well. So it's a cornucopia of forces for Washington. And here you see a representation of the siege weaponry that's coming down from Newport. So you have fleets coming in from the north and you have fleets coming in from the south, bringing absolutely essential material that without any question, without it, Washington didn't have a chance of winning the even beginning to put Yorkville and Cornwallis under siege. But look at this amount of money that de Grasse is bringing in, roughly $29 to $31 million in today's exchange rate for what the silver would be worth. Now, the questions have to be asked: is why in the name of heaven is Louis XVI doing this? He is committing 1.3 billion livres, French currency, to the American Revolution. In today's times, we'd be looking at 13 to 20 billion dollars. This is an order of support that would be in line with what America is doing right now with the battle between Ukraine and Putin. And why is Louis doing it? Well, for one thing, he's mad as hell that they lost the 7-year war, and he fantasizes and he lusts after returning France to the balance, to the power structure it had with a balance of power with England before the 7 Years' War, and he sees it as an economic opportunity to set up a new alliance with a new nation, the 13 colonies that he sees that are going to develop very, very nicely economically, and he wants new ties to them. And of course, he wants to protect his lucrative islands in the Caribbean. And the sad thing, and we'll get into this more effectively, it's an incredible Pyrrhic victory. Louis XVI will win in this endeavor. They will assist us in defeating the British, but it destroys the French government, destroys Louis XVI. His debt is so large that he can't raise taxes on his own anymore, and he must call in the Estates General, and he fantasizes that he'll call in this legislative body that's been moribund for years, decades and decades, and they'll do what he tells them to do and then go away. And of course, that doesn't happen. So, but the other part of this is again an element that happens, and again, it's incredible. So Admiral de Grasse comes up from Havana, brings the resupplies to Rochambeau into Washington, the extra men, the arms and supplies, and the hard species. Then he sails out off the Cape, off of the Cape, and he knows that Admiral Graves is coming down with the British from Clinton in New York. And so the parallel here is interesting. So the French fleet under Grasse is larger than the British fleet coming down, which is kind of surprising considering the size of the British Navy. So the British have 19 ships of the line, and de Grasse has 24, and de Grasse has about 300 more guns than the British. So it's a substantial edge, and they have about 6,000 more men. So they and the flagship that Graves is on has 98 guns, but de Grasse's ship has 104 guns. So the French have an advantage here. And they come out and they sail in the ordinary pattern that they're used to in this time period. They're going to line up and they're going to try to cross the T and come in, but really it'll just be broadsides that they'll be engaging with one another. That has the history of world-changing naval encounters. This is not very impressive in all the particulars you would expect. It doesn't last very long. It only lasts a handful of hours, as these kinds of casualties go. The British don't suffer very many casualties, and none of the ships are sunk. The only ship that is in serious trouble is a British ship that is in more trouble from being in disrepair than from being wounded by the French. But amazingly enough, Graves withdraws from the battle and returns to New York. Um, I wonder if he has any inkling of what import there was to what he was doing when he turns around and returns to New York and he abandons Cornwallis. So that means, number one, Cornwallis cannot be taken out and returned to New York. Number two, he can't get any new supplies of any kind of reinforcements. And number three, he could make it across the York River to escape, but now he has no ships that would be available to him to do that. So for all practical purposes, the battle is done at that point in time when that goes over and everything else has come in. And so here we continue with the march to Yorktown, and Washington and Rochambeau now have come down. They've passed through Philadelphia, and now they're at this strange named place, Head of the Elk. And there is Robert Morris, who's the money man of the revolution. And now, thanks to de Grasse, he has hard currency, has loads and loads of hard currency, silver coins. Here are the schooner captains. These are the guys that have control the low draft vessels out here in the harbor. And without those low draft vessels, there's no way that Washington and Rochambeau are going to be able to transport some of their men by water down to Yorktown. These men are not going to run out their boats without hard currency, knowing what the nature of the Continental is at that point. And here again is another merchant. Here's a merchant selling the foodstuffs that are absolutely essential. And here again, he's getting hard currency. So without this hard currency, Washington would not have moved south from where he was at Elk Head. And so this hard currency, and of course it also is going to be important in paying the men. And remember, uh, it's not like the invasion of Normandy, where the U.S. Army lands with all these trucks and jeeps and tanks. Although that wagonry was owned by somebody else, and they had to hire that, and the teamsmen that came with it, and they had to have hard currency to do that. So here's the map, and here's Head of Elk up here at the head of Chesapeake Bay. And then, so some are going to land and travel by water down here to Marshall by Yorktown, and then another force is going to march down across here to gather. Interestingly enough, Washington is going to take Rochambeau, and he's going to take a side trip off to Mount Vernon to introduce Rochambeau to his wife, Martha, and to enjoy some time at Mount Vernon. An interesting sideline that I would have not anticipated. But what we have is Washington and Rochambeau's men now heading heading south, marching south towards Yorktown. And again, this is a Gemini picture, not a banana picture. ridiculous portrayal of a cannon, but it gets the point. Now, that is a story of logistics that is so unusual in what's happening with Washington. The same freaking thing, not the same thing, but the story of the logistics for Napoleon and the story of Toulon and the siege of Toulon are every bit as uh, bizarre. I mean, there's no other way to describe it than bizarre. Napoleon is a young man, literally just out of military school, out of military academy. He actually goes from graduation back to Corsica and spends a substantial amount of time in Corsica. Technically, he's actually AWOL because he's staying way beyond what would be any relevant leave time. And some would say he was actually plotting for independence for Corsica, which of course would have been treasonous. Um, but now he comes back, and his skills, improvisation, requisition, political maneuvering, he shows extraordinary skills here for a man of 24 years. So he finds the French artillery almost non-existent. There's nothing there, hardly any guns. There's no ammunition, and there's no transportation. Uh, there's nothing that would enable any type of siege weaponry, siege warfare to take place against the siege works that the royalists have set up in Toulon. And so what Napoleon is going to do, he's going to go out and he's going to scavenge the local resources, the local countryside, and he is going to bring together the equipment, tools that he is going to need to get this job done. He's going to do it by intimidating, blackmailing, coercing those who have what he wants, whether it's civilians or military. And it's an extraordinary example of innovation and I'm almost speechless trying to describe what indeed he's doing. Realize what he's doing. In a matter of weeks, months, he's setting up an arsenal. He's gathering 80 blacksmiths, wheelwrights, carpenters, and he's beginning to build his own equipment. He doesn't have any powder, so he's beginning to set up powder wagons, and he's beginning to I believe he begins to manufacture his own powder. Uh, did he have authorization to do any of this? Well, we're going to find out that he has two political sponsors, and those political sponsors are and here they are, Salazar, who is also a Corsican, I believe, and Robespierre, who we've mentioned before, and happens to be the brother of Maximilian Robespierre, who is the one leading the terror up in Paris. And as representatives on mission, that means they're the hand of the revolution, and for someone to disobey them and their recommendations, their orders, in the age of terror, was an act of suicide. And so it means that any of the military that are the left, remember, most of the military were nobility, and they're all gone now to a large degree. So, and anyone who's in the military knows how risky their status is in the revolutionary times that they're in, and the reign of terror that they see all around them. So the commander, who is there, and we'll go through this again in a minute, is leery about having such a young guy come in and take over, but they really have no option, and they're going to have to let this go forward as it is set up. And by late October, in a matter of weeks, Napoleon ends up commanding 64 officers, 1,500 men, and 100 cannon, or you can call it 100 tubes if you want to use. And so it'd be a combination of vicious. This is part of the reason why it happens. The guy who had been there in charge of the artillery before him is wounded and out of action, so they need someone to replace him. Salizetti is aware of Napoleon's academic record. And I don't know if the two schools he was at, but certainly at the École Militaire in Paris, and his record was outstanding. We do know that. And the other thing that is incredibly serendipitous, um, uh, Napoleon at this time in July writes a pamphlet. It's a publication, uh, and it basically is four guys sitting in a tavern having a drink, discussing, and they're discussing the revolution. And the sympathetic character in the discussion is sympathetic to the revolution. And Robespierre's brother is aware of that. And so Robespierre brothers sees Napoleon as one of them, as one of the revolution, and puts trust in him, and supports him in his call to go forward, and take over. So what uh, it's unbelievable the stuff that Napoleon's able to bring together, and we'll talk some more about it later. But now let's go on to the other element of this that is absolutely fascinating, and that is the leadership, and the contrast between the two leaders. Uh, Here you see a type of scene that we'll talk to before, where uh, Napoleon is very much down in the mud with his men manhandling the weaponry, and the British are off here in the harbor. Some of these batteries are at tremendous risk because the French and Spanish fleet out here can bring them under gunfire very, very rapidly. And we'll tell you later the incredible efforts that Napoleon takes to make that not happen. And here we see a total contrast. Here's uh, Napoleon as a leader of one. Here we have Washington meeting with Rochambeau. This is the meeting in Connecticut that we mentioned earlier, and Washington is meeting with Rochambeau. I think this is the first time they actually met. They actually form a remarkable relationship, and their correspondence is fascinating to look at. And at the table is also Knox, who is, of course, as I've said, Washington's artillery chief. And Duportel is another Frenchman that Louis XVI has set over. And Duportel is an engineer, and his task again is to assist um, uh, Washington and the Americans. And it's in an area where the Americans have virtually no experience and no background. So he's going to be incredibly valuable. Now, the thing that's interesting here is that Washington is fixated on attacking Clinton directly in New York. He wants to get this over, and he wants to set up a decisive battle and defeat Clinton. If he defeats Clinton, the Revolution War should be over. Rochambeau says, no, you're not ready, we're not ready. Duportel says, no, you're not ready, we're not ready. I don't have any evidence as to what Knox's advice was, but it could have been the same. So they have a hard time convincing Washington, and it'll take some more evidence. So the contrast between these two men is really, really quite interesting as we look at them across some time. Um, so the image you see here is very reminiscent of what we just showed you from Connecticut, and um, Washington is similar in some ways to Eisenhower. One of the comments made about Eisenhower is he was kind of a chairman of the board. He had very difficult people. He had Churchill to work with. He had Montgomery to work with. He had de Gaulle to work with. Very, very difficult people. I don't see any of this evidence that these are difficult people. Washington gets along exceedingly well with them. The image of Napoleon shows the difference. Napoleon isn't standing in council with anyone. Napoleon is telling them what he wants them to do, how he wants them to do it, and that's all he cares about. his own will and where it goes forward. And the style is different. Their ages, of course, are vastly different, and some of this comes from their age as well as their style. But Washington is going to show tremendous restraint. He's going to show tremendous patience, uh, uh, and he is willing to accept help and learn from that help. Remember, he's taken in Lafayette to assist him. He's taken in Baron von Steuben to assist him and help him. So he's willing. Not all generals are willing to accept help. Montgomery is a case in point in World War II, an incredible contrast. And here we see Napoleon as a very, very young man, as a man of kinetic energy, and he's going to be a whirling dervish on the battlefield. And again, this is a stupid image here, but again, it gets the point of him being there. And the difference, again, an incredibly difference here between them. Uh, Washington has his shared legacy with his men in the difficulty of Valley Forge. Um, he has led them into stunning victories in Trenton and an incredible attack he roots there. And Napoleon uh, uh, wows his people with his technical ability. Uh, Both these men are going to command the space when they walk into a room. Well, Washington's going to do it because of his physical presence, and comment after comment talks about how he is a commanding figure. Napoleon's going to walk in and prove very, very quickly that he's the smartest man in the room, um, and you should listen because of that. And uh, again, here, the communication, the form of discipline that they show, very, very different. Washington's acceptance of degree of some hierarchy. Uh, Napoleon as a young Turk, as a young man, and finding the way he can command, finding the way he can motivate his men, finding the way he can produce the results on the battlefield that he wants. And the background of Washington as a surveyor, as someone who uh, debates the coordination with the French Navy, has to accept the patient of waiting for the Navy to get into place. Napoleon, again, uh, totally driven and opportunistic in the way in which he does it. So uh, Washington very, very clearly setting about to build institutions. He very, very clearly has a goal of building what will be the new United States. And obviously, when he goes on to become president, and Napoleon seeing himself as an outsider. We talked about him in his youth, both in his first school and then in Corps Militaire, where he was an outsider because of his wealth, because of his accent, because of his standing, and um, his need to get into artillery, where it would go by meritocracy and not by um, rank. And then again, we've already mentioned the one on Council of War versus coup d'etat action. And in both of them, uh, uh, Napoleon has tremendous uh, technical knowledge. He has the math skills. He has the geographic skills that are fruitful in this, the science skills that are necessary to uh, to use the artillery, and we'll talk some more of that later when we talk about artillery. And Washington is just very, very different. Um, and again, here it reiterates that the institution and the genius this comes out. So Washington's leadership is the mature leadership that comes uh, from his many years uh, working with the military, not just the years in the revolution, but in the years prior to that. I've already mentioned the nature of the relationship between Rochambeau and um, uh, Washington. Uh, One of the constants in American military history is a very, very successful and constant use of allies, where America constantly marshals allies, works with those allies in a very, very productive manner. We talked about that when we talked about Bagration and the Overlord, and the contrast between the Soviet military and the U.S. military. And it is certainly true here. And we've talked about uh, Washington have a grand understanding what he's doing. So the deception that he mounts, that we've already mentioned to some degree, is showing his overall thinking, and he does this in conjunction with Rochambeau, of course. And that long-term strategic planning is something that is very, very um, powerful, and some of the people fighting with him, Americans, just don't have that at all. And again, we've mentioned the deference, the maturity to realize where he doesn't have the expertise and his ability to lean on someone else, the naval gunfire. He doesn't have any experience in siege warfare. So when Rochambeau tells him about the Vauban method of how you do a siege, he listens and executes, and then he integrates Rochambeau's troops into the Allied forces that are fighting here. So it's the total absence of ego on the part of Washington that is so extraordinary. And certainly don't have that with Napoleon, and it becomes important there. So uh, you can't over enforce how important patience is in siege warfare. And some of Washington's subordinates are much more impatient than he are, that want to get at it and to charge, and they really don't like all of this work of digging all these holes, that slow and methodical work of moving closer and closer to the outer works of the Yorktown, uh, and again, the mature, the the learning from defeats is so important. Keeping his casualties minimally is so important. And then the character he shows of keeping his men from looting, the imposition of a moral code on his troops, the humane treatment of prisoners of war in incredible conflict with what the British are doing with American POWs who are on horrible, horrible prison ships in New York Harbor, suffering terribly. And of course, we don't yet know about his uh, giving up the offer of the throne. I live right by New Windsor, where this actually happened, right up the road from where I am. Uh, so these are all incredible elements telling us about Washington. And again, the we'll talk again about his courage in combat, and his courage under fire, and his willingness to expose himself and share risk with his men. Uh, and the other thing about here, you'll sometimes hear Washington's strategy called the Fabian strategy. And this is actually derived from a Roman general, Quintus Fabius Maximus, who fought against Hannibal. And what he realized is that Hannibal was extraordinary, and his Fabian's responsibility was to preserve the Roman army, and so not engage in pitched battle with Hannibal, and to survive, so he could be able to fight on for another day. And this is the similar type of idea that Washington uses. And many would say that this is what Ho Chi Minh did in Vietnam, and indeed he may have learned some of it uh, from from Washington, from a study of Washington. Now, Napoleon's style is, again, he's a much younger man, so his way is very different. And again, you're going to see him right up in the front lines. He's a young man. Now, the if we want to talk about 6 elements of Napoleon that mark his career as a marshal, as an emperor, uh, every one of them is for foretold here at uh, Toulon, and it's really quite extraordinary. One of his constant strengths is finding where the decisive point is. And as I look at this map of this battleground before me, where is the most important place? How do I take care of that? How do I move with it? With artillery, he will be a master, and he'll change the way in which artillery is used. Field artillery, Henry Marks, I'm sure, used it scattered. It would be spread among the units. Each military unit would have a, a, a unit of artillery attached to it. But what he's going to do is he's going to concentrate artillery, and he's going to concentrate it into a grand battery, and it's going to have devastating impact. And here are future battles where these elements become absolutely essential when it goes on. Um, as we said, he has scavenger logistics. When he comes to Toulon, there is nothing there, so he just roams through the countryside, collecting everything that he needs. And he will develop this as a very powerful tool. He will reorganize the French army in the corps, and each of the corps will be what we would today would call combined arms. And each of them was expected to raise their own logistics in the field off the ground. And we've already talked about massing overwhelming fire. And then the other part that he will develop way beyond this is a rapid concentration of force. And we'll talk more here about that. And as we said, and as you'll see again, he shows constant uh, uh, personal bravery in front of the troops, and this wins him favor with the troops. And he speaks to the men. He shares hardships with them. He has an oratory, even though he has a Corsican accent. He um, has whatever it is, whatever charisma is, he has it. And the other element he has that we've mentioned repeatedly is he has tremendous understanding of the mathematics of artillery and of understanding the terrain, looking at a map and understanding what it's telling him and how to use that map to position his artillery and his weaponry to do the most effective work the fastest. And these are mappings of his movements all across Europe. That's not our concern right here, right now. And incredible initiative. Uh, he uh, he doesn't wait for someone to tell him something's all right. He's going to take the initiative, and certain, I guess, ad someone who is committed to let's do it first, and rather than ask for permission, ask for forgiveness if we overstate. And he is going to seize power until eventually he crowns himself as emperor. And here's some of the things we've talked to, and we've talked about the artillery dominance. We've talked about the terrain. We've talked about the leadership. We've talked about the audaciousness, but we haven't talked about the speed. One of his constants will be his speed of movement. If you talk about McClellan in the American Civil War, no one ever would ever accuse McClellan of moving with any rapidity. So it's really not our our subject here to go past the date of Toulon, but I'm absolutely flabbergasted by the incredible job Napoleon does in restructuring the French army as he gets into his wars, and the whole concept of operational art, which is the main thing in today, and the whole concept of combined arms. We talked last session about Tukhachevsky and deep operation. An awful lot of what Napoleon is doing here is akin to what was talked to there. And we're not going to go into this to a large degree, so don't try to study these. But basically, he will eventually, much later, this is 1805, is going to organize the corps system, and the corps system is going to have artillery, and it's going to have cavalry, and it's going to have infantry and engineers, a combined operation. They're gonna move with tremendous speed. The structure is going to give him flexibility. It's going to give him speed, and it's going to give him the ability to command with some clarity and the maneuvering cross. And again, I'm not going to spend time on that. But he changes warfare forever in the nature of how he does this. But again, that comes after our battle of Toulon. So Washington, mature, collaborative. Napoleon, brilliance, audacity, rapid innovation. And you got to realize the constancy of the innovation. So he's going out trying to put together an artillery force. So where can I get the artillery? Where can I get the men that I need to make these guns, make this powder, repair these guns, repair this powder, and we'll show you some more on that later, and how again fortunate he was with that came along. So that then takes care of us for that section. We'll now in the next section go on to planning and tactics. So we'll take a break here and see you on the next part.